Hey, Matthias and Daniel, how are you doing today?
Very good. How are you?
Doing pretty well. Good to see both of you back on the stream and the first time with the two of you together.
Indeed, yeah,
Yeah, good to
really
meet you.
exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially for the fact that I think there's been a few new tools that have come out this year and uh, also kind of under the umbrella of kind of a new entity that's kind of had a quiet and soft rollout as we've started to see the DAX optimizer and Power BI Explorer that's come out. So I'm really interested to see both kind of a dive into at least one of the tools and also to hear more about some of the involvement that you two have had and a few other kind of key stakeholders that have been involved in the production and evolution of some of these tools that have come out.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a minor correction, Reed, the tool that we're going to show today is called PBI Explorer, not Power BI Explorer.
Yeah. Just for saying the full name, but yes, it's shortened to PBI Explorer, correct. So if people are Googling it, it'll be PBI Explorer is the one that will come up. I think if you Google Power BI Explorer, nothing actually shows. Interestingly enough, just the other day I was showing a client, I Google PBI Explorer, your actual website's the first link. This web stream, this live stream is link number 2 on Google. It was right below it. If you actually
Right.
Google this right now, yeah, at least in the
Yeah.
US. But I thought that was kind of funny that already the stream at least was getting decent promotion for people to get a deep dive into it. I know like both of you have been involved quite a bit in the community in general with external tools. So this is, to quote an American phrase, like it's not your first rodeo when it comes to
Hmm.
building external tools. Matthias, you've essentially created, you did create PBI tools, the original extension for that. We're heavily involved in the fact that we got Tyndall this year rather than
Hmm.
probably 2 to 4 years from now, which would have been, I think, something that would have happened further down in the pipeline. And Daniel, of course, you were the essentially the creator of Tabular Editor. And I think with most good external tools we've had is that it started with you two had a pain point in your organization for yourselves, and like, well, I need something for me that just helps me do my job, and maybe other people might find this useful as well. I think a lot of tools end up getting built because it services a need for the individual first before they realize it's use cases for the community abroad. But at least from my end, that's a bit of an introduction for at least how I'm aware of the two of you. But do you want to
Hmm.
also fill in any gaps and give a bit of a background on yourselves as well? Matthias, if you'd like to go first.
Uh, yeah, let me just talk a little bit about PBI Explorer to begin with, because
Sure.
that follows straight from what you just mentioned. The because it many of the ideas come directly both from Tabular Editor as well as PBI Tools. But the one thing that made a difference and which we basically reacted to was Microsoft releasing Power BI Developer Mode earlier this year,
Yep.
which for developer-focused people like us was almost a revolution, right? It's a really big deal. The Power BI world finally moving into a code-first approach, and anyone who was watching the developer mode announcements and was particularly interested in reports and visuals probably had a bit of a disappointment, because what we're getting as far as a code view for reports is concerned is very, very limited at this point. We're basically getting
I would say
a
non-existent. Yeah.
massive JSON file that is basically unreadable because it's mangled together with sometimes tens of thousands of characters on one line of JSON. So this is not something that is human approachable. And that's precisely where we came from, because we were so excited about all these investments towards developers, but we wanted to go a few steps further. And that's basically what PBI Explorer does. Sort of taking the theme of sort of going sort of closer to the underlying code, but making it accessible, viewable, approachable to anyone out there. And I'm sure we'll see that plenty of times later this hour.
Yep. And I I mean, you built the one tool that I made a valiant attempt to try to do, and also again, to shout out, he might be on this, Didier. He helped me a lot with the Power Query, and even Daniel Marsh Patrick with the Denim visual to display kind of what you already showed, where you plot the X, Y, and Z axes, and you can show the visuals on the page. But it was so many hours to try to even correctly get the information from that JSON, and I'll just say that there is some conversations at some point with someone had me kind of pause, just to like, all right, well, TIMDL's come out. Maybe someday in the future, there's going to be a TIMDL for reporting. So like, why spend 100 hours to try to extract this nasty JSON when it might be more beneficial to wait for a more readable language to then parse this out. You're just reading the report JSON files. So like, I'm still like, kudos to the level of effort, because I try to actually dissect that correctly for any PBIX. I'm sure it was a large task to look through that and render a readable and then provide all the visuals. So it's exactly what I would have liked to build, but just not enough time and resources to do something like that. So I'm very happy to see this, and I know that there's that little coming soon button that's going to be an analysis of that. That like I'm waiting for Christmas Day to happen when that comes out, because the only way, at least today, still to audit a report is you take your mouse and you have to like move over the screen. You have to look for like items that are popping. Like, it is a legit manual review, and it is very time consuming. Having a magic button that just tells you what's wrong will save so much time and effort for anybody that builds reports. So I think that will be a great thing once it eventually comes out. But this is kind of an exciting start to a lot of that stuff for sure.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you are not at all alone in this. I mean, you mentioned Daniel Mars Patrick and Didier, and I think there are many other as well in the community who have tried to do something like this even before we had Power BI developer mode. Yep. People would unzip the PBIX file and try to make sense of the metadata inside it. I think also who created the field finder tool, was that Imke? Maybe Imke Feldman? Yeah.
Field finder, and now we have the measures killer. But yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. So there's truly a huge demand in the community for an application like this that allows us to make sense of all of the metadata in the report. And we got together, the bunch of us, the Tabular Tools team, a while ago and discussed what options were available for this, and especially thanks to Mathias's knowledge from being a contributor to the Power BI team. This might have given us a slight edge, but at least we realized early on what we would be capable of doing if we joined forces. And it's important to say that it's not just Mathias and me, but the Tabular Tools company that we have started is comprised of, it's a collaboration basically between the SQL BI team, who everyone here probably already knows, Marco and Alberto, Daniele Pirelli as well. That's probably why the site is already ranking so high when you search for it on Google. And then, of course, Mathias and the Tabular Editor team, myself and David, who's, by the way, in the chat answering questions. So we're quite a big team and a pretty good constellation, if I dare say so myself. So yeah, this is super exciting, and yeah, as you mentioned, DAX Optimizer was the first product that was released by Tabular Tools earlier this year. But now we're seeing the next tool come up, PBI Explorer, and you can rest assured that we are working on other stuff as well. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, I mean, you're collectively between you two and SQL BI, like the only person left out of that equation who's built some of those cornerstone external tools would be Darren, who's done DAX Studio. But even DAX Studio is still, adjacent slightly to SQL BI, because they're the icons that, the graphic designer did all the new icons for DAX Studio 3. So there's even still an association with that. But most of the people who built some of the most complex external tools kind of have all collaborated. So I can see why this was finally able to kind of get off the ground. Ironically enough, like PBI tools through Didier's side tools thing was the thing that actually let me extract to get all that metadata out of the report layer to try to even build like the bookmark documenter, which was what I was trying to build. So your tool was already involved in that when I was attempting to do this as far as that extraction process. I'm excited to kind of see this. I know there's already some questions that I think will partially be answered as we start getting into this stuff. But if you're ready, I can flip over and we can get started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Excellent.
Let's do it.
There we are.
All right. So the tool is already available for download from our website. It's in beta still, meaning that there are a lot of unfinished features and there are probably also a lot of bugs. We have this GitHub repository where we encourage people to submit feedback. Anything from enhancements, feature requests, and bug reports, of course, is more than welcome. But anyway, when you fire up the tool for the first time, you're going to see a welcome screen, which looks more or less like this. And we already have a few plans to extend this view with, for example, a recent files list to make it easier to get back to the file you were previously working on. And you'll see right now we have 2 areas available out of 3. There's going to be 3 main features of the tool. The first one is inspect report, which is already working. We have the compare report, and then we have the analyze report. Analyze report is still nothing happens if you click on it. It's a coming soon feature. We're still working on this, but you can think of it basically as a best practice analyzer for your Power BI reports. And we're going to use first of all we're going to provide a set of like standard best practice rules that we believe everyone should follow when designing reports. Stuff like, the number of visuals you should have on a page, always remembering to show access titles, whatever we can infer from the report metadata, which we believe makes sense. Maybe we should mention that we've partnered up with Kurt Buloff, the Data Goblins guy, who also has this Power BI report checklist, which basically covers a lot of the stuff that we could build into a report analyzer. So for sure, we're going to ship these rules, but we are also going to make it customizable. And the customization is going to be pretty similar to how the best practice analyzer works in Tabular Editor, in that we will have this expression language that people can use to design their own best practice rules. Perhaps there are some enterprise or organizational conventions that you have to use certain colors of fonts or whatever, and that could easily be implemented using these rules as well. So that is what's coming. It's still not available. We are still working on it. It's coming soon. I'm afraid I can't give a specific date, but rest assured that when we go out of the beta version that we have now and into a full GA version, you will have the report analyzer as well.
The moment you need someone to eat the dog food version of that, please let me know. I will be so happy to like throw 100 reports at that and tell you what didn't work.
Exactly.
We are totally aware that there's huge demand for that kind of best practice analyzer. We've already had very, very good feedback from some connections behind the scenes, with ideas. But everyone who's on the chat, everyone who's listening, feel free to submit your own ideas regarding what kind of rules you would like to see covered. If you want to use GitHub issues, that would be a great place for it, for instance.
David, if he's on the chat and has the link to that exact specific one, I think I already have it in the description, but I'll make sure to get that pasted into the chat as well.
Yeah, I'm sure David can find the link for it in a few seconds.
In fact, sorry, Daniel, you could even show how you can get that from within the tool.
I can, I probably can, if I remember where to click.
Sorry, I didn't want to put you on the spot.
Right,
it's the question mark.
The question mark button, and then we actually have links to various things that, like, we have the about dialog, we have the terms and conditions. Report issue will take you directly to the GitHub site, so it just appeared on a different monitor. So let's try that again. Report issue. Oh yeah, here we go. So okay. So I need to make sure I'm signed into Git, but you get the idea. The links are all here. So
perfect. So, so it's built into the tool.
Yeah. So the first thing one might want to do when loading PBI Explorer is to try to open a report. So you click the Inspect Report button, and it shows the Select File dialog. We support a number of different file types. We support the PBIX file format, of course. We also support PBI-T, Power BI templates. And then we also support the raw report.json file, which is the file format you would find if you were using the new Power BI developer mode file structure. So for now, let me just try to load one of these sample reports provided by Microsoft. For example, we can look at the COVID bake-off. And then the first thing you'll see, and this is still a work in progress, by the way, this is a summary page. In fact, what you see on my screen now looks slightly different than the publicly available version, because we are making some changes to this all the time. But the idea here is that we want to provide sort of a high-level overview of the report and make it as actionable as possible. So, for example, if you've inherited a report from someone, and the report is slow, or users are complaining about it for whatever reason, we then want to give you sort of the 30-second overview, so you can get an idea of what's going on in the report. Is it a massive report with a ton of pages? Are you overusing certain visuals? Do you have many report level filters which can make it difficult to understand what's going on? Then that's the kind of information we want to show you on this page. So, for example, here in the first box on the left, we have the number of pages in the visual, and then we have a ranking of the 3 pages with the most visuals in them. So, for example, the US vaccinations page has 17 visuals, which is probably not too bad. I mean, you could probably have reports with hundreds of visuals on a single page. Some people really like to go wild when they're creating their reports.
Yeah.
And that will probably be a big issue. This report, I don't think that's a big thing. But the point is that you can then click on one of these, and it'll take you directly to a wireframe view. So basically, this simplified rendering of this report page. So for sure, since we don't necessarily have access to the data, I mean, the PBIX file could be just a thin report locally on your computer with a connection to a data set in the Power BI service, and in that case, we wouldn't have access to any of the data. So we can only show the basic structure of the report, the basic layout. So showing you which visuals are where. We do show these kind of watermark images for certain visual types. So sometimes we don't do that, and that's because, unfortunately, so this one is supposed to be a shape map, as you can see here from the hierarchy. But for some reason, we don't have watermarks for shape maps currently, so I would count that as a bug. And then you can see we have all of these smaller boxes at the top. These are apparently action buttons.
So curiously, just as a little bit, because I'm curious about the mechanics, just because I've ripped apart this, tried to rip apart this file. So like the shape map has that little string, and I know custom visuals also have like really funky like hex code titles essentially.
Yeah.
Now, do those change report to report, or let's assume you downloaded InfoRiver or anything from the system? Do they have a static name, and do you basically just need to provide like a mapping key table somewhere in the back end that just says this equals that from like wherever the custom visuals are? Or
so for custom visuals it's a bit tricky, and maybe Mathias can talk a little bit about that, but we actually don't really have support for custom visuals at the moment, but that is of course something we're working on. I do believe though that custom visuals actually embed some information within the report JSON, or maybe in some of the adjacent files. So we may be able to even import an icon for that particular custom visual, so we could at least make it render nicely.
So you can at least, you might have a string name, but you'd get the same icon that was in the report or something.
Right. Yeah, now specifically for the name, you'll notice that right now we are showing some of these. They kind of look like GUIDs, but as you said, they are some kind of hex code. It's just some randomly assigned string that Power BI assigns whenever you create a visual. However, the good news is that, for example, when you change the type of a visual, let's say you turn a bar chart into a line chart, then it retains that string. So that actually that's important when we get to the report comparer aspect, because then we actually have the lineage, so we know what was the visual that got changed into something else.
Now, just for a little bit of background conversation as well, Matthias, I was curious on like knowing the mechanics of some of the backend. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think one point might be quite useful here, which is actually what makes PBI Explorer really unique and special, and I think very different from what other people have tried, is that we are not just sort of consuming the JSON payload and then somehow plotting it into a UI. What we did was actually what Microsoft should have done, to be honest. So we're using publicly available schema information that Microsoft provides about all their built-in visual types. And we build a complete object model against which we can then actually run scripts and build that UI. So if you're familiar with tabular modeling and you know the tabular object model, it's exactly that, only applied to the report. And I know for sure, Microsoft doesn't even have anything like that. But we we put our brains together and actually build it. We mostly did that because we want to make sure that this is really solid and future-proof, and that it evolves in line with how Power BI evolves, without us investing massively into today's JSON formats and then suddenly having to redo everything next year or so. Just for everyone to understand, also sort of the level of investment here. And now coming back to the original point, that is one reason why support for custom visuals is somehow limited, because obviously we currently don't have access to the internal schemas in the same way. And what we're going to do moving forward is that we'll probably have to select sort of the most frequently used custom visuals and then extract that information, from their GitHub repositories or so. We don't have a fully fleshed out plan yet, but hopefully it makes sense. That is all going to be based on user feedback as well, obviously. If we get a lot of requests for one particular custom visual, then obviously we'll go and add support for it.
And I imagine this is going to be a very dynamic evolution as you're getting feedback, and there's the gaps that you may or may not even be aware of. This is something that this can provide, as you get a lot of user input for what people liked and what people are looking for from something like this.
Exactly. But it is important, though, to point out what the scope of PBI Explorer is, and that is that it's just going to be a read-only tool. So we're not going to let you. So even though we have a property grid here where we can view all of the properties of individual visuals, like their XY coordinates, width and height, and even data bindings and filters and all of that, we're not going to let you edit any of these properties. And the main reason for that, of course, is that, well, even though we can actually obtain all of this information from the report JSON file, it is completely unsupported to actually write anything back. So Microsoft will not support or is not currently supporting third-party tools making changes to the report JSON metadata. But still, I mean, even as a read-only tool, we still believe that this is pretty powerful, and I haven't even shown you all the features yet. So yeah.
I'll see if I can find the idea for it. It might be out there somewhere. But like my encouragement also just to people as well in watching this is, if you want like a readable language like Tyndall for report, like make that known on Twitters and LinkedIn's. I'm sure, I know that there are people at Microsoft who monitor that stuff, and getting community voice as a need for a future, I'm sure helps them figure out where they should focus effort on anything that may or may not come out in the future. So getting voices of people like, we really, really need this, will help them make decisions for themselves on what to tackle next. But I would hope that a natural evolution would be Tyndall, and then someday we're going to get that same thing like an RMDL, report definition language, or RDL, but we can't call it that because there are other files already called RDL.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and on that note,
Go ahead, yeah.
In Tabular Editor, we have the TOM Explorer. Here we call it the Report Explorer, but the correct analog would be a ROM Explorer. However, ROM has some other meanings as an acronym, so it's probably better to just leave it as Report Explorer, right? So let's.
I would just say that right as you do that, just two quick questions on what you have on the screen from people, because I do want to try to keep a conversation with the audience. So one, is it possible to export any of these results into an Excel or a database? So take the data that you've extracted in this printable format and park it somewhere else.
So we don't have that feature scoped right now. However, one thing we have discussed internally is that since we have an actual object model of the report, it could make sense to provide some scripting interface similar to Tabular Editor's scripting, which would basically let you traverse the object model any way you like, and then of course create some kind of output that you could export into other formats. Perhaps for this specific request, if we get it from many users, we may consider having some standard export functionality built in, but we need, of course, to figure out what kind of information are you looking to get out of the tool, and why not just use the tool to work with the information right there instead of relying on the tabular data format used by Excel, for example. Because that could probably get unwieldy pretty quickly. So let us know what is the information you actually need. What is it that you want to export, and we'll look into it.
Excellent, thank you.
Was there another question you wanted to?
They did get answered in the chat. I'll pose my own question. My whole initial design when I was even trying to get anything from the report layer was to do a bookmark documentation. I'd be curious if there's ever going to be anything, because I was trying to do a visual like you did on the screen, because I wanted to be able to select a bookmark, have it show objects, but then have it show essentially what is this bookmark touching, because you have selected visuals, you have all visuals, and some way to be able to look and just get an approximate a bit of information that just tells you maybe what the bookmark was trying to do. You can kind of see into the person's head that was creating it. And I'm wondering if there's any plans to maybe have, because you know what filters are attaching all of these now, and you have all those links. So having a list where you'd select the bookmark, and then it shows you, oh, that's filtering this and this. It's applying 2 filters here, 1 filter here, or something like that. So some kind of a graphical layout of what the bookmark is talking to.
Oh, there are plans.
Yes. Okay, good. Because that was one of my biggest pains is every time I'm ever given a workbook from anyone else where there's a bunch of bookmarks, like if I ever need to update it, I never even attempt to like figure out what the original one was doing. I just make a new one myself because it's impossible to reverse engineer it once it's been built unless somebody wrote it down.
Bookmarks by far is the most confusing aspect of Power BI Desktop and the most difficult one to navigate. So for sure, we are going to invest a lot in making that readily available in PBI Explorer.
Beautiful.
Unfortunately, it's also a particular challenge regarding how to actually bring that in the UI in a good way. So because the bookmark definitions can get very complex. So that's why we haven't shipped it yet. But it's absolutely a top item on the roadmap.
Even the Microsoft team that I've talked to, because I think I've had conversations with Mo and a few others, and it's like, why isn't there any management view for this? Like we tried like dozens of different ways, and there was no way to graphically display it that worked with a page that had like 100 visuals, because those exist, and have it like make sense and not break Power BI Desktop.
Well, I'm sure we can do better than desktop. We already have good ideas, but we need a few more cycles to get there.
No, I mean, like as you said, bookmarks are one of probably, I would say they're the most complicated part of the report layer in terms of the complexity of its connection points and the neural network basically that it has in terms of things that it touches. It is, the amount of lines of code behind it are kind of ridiculous.
All right, let's move on a little bit because there are some very interesting features that I would like to show. Also, some upcoming features that are not yet available in the public version, but will be very soon in a matter of days. So first of all, you may already have noticed the little info boxes we have in the top of the screen. So like this one shows if there are any visual level filters applied. So here you can see in the tooltip it says 2 filters, 1 active. And this basically means that 2 fields have been dragged into the filters area for this visual, but only one of them actually has a filter selection that impacts the visual. But then right next to this button is the incoming and outgoing interactions. And very soon in the next update, when you hover over one of these, it's going to draw these little arrows which show you, okay, so where are these inbound interactions actually coming from? Or if I hover over the other one, where are the outbound interactions going? So maybe this page is a bit of a bad example. Let's go to a different one. Let's see, maybe this one is a bit more interesting. So yeah, here it's a little more obvious what's happening. So for example, when I hover over the inbound interactions, you can see that apparently all other 3 visuals on this page seem to interact with this visual. So basically meaning if I click somewhere up in this visual, it's going to highlight probably the visual that I'm hovering over, or alternatively the other way, obviously. So this looks like this is just the default interactions, right? But this will also take interaction overrides into account. So if you've disabled interactions between 2 visuals, then we are also going to show that here. So hopefully this is very useful for people who find themselves managing a huge web of interactions between visuals and trying to get it just right, because we believe that this type of this way of visualizing how interactions work is simpler and easier to manage than what is currently available in Power BI Desktop.
And one of the big pain points of that, honestly, for me is the fact that, I mean, and again, I've talked to, I think, Mo, and apparently they went through a ton of different ways to manage this, and like the current build that they have of how you turn on and off is the best one apparently of whatever they designed. But I really wished I could click a visual and say turn off all interactions into it. If there's 50 visuals on the page, I have to click 49 different visuals and tell it not to talk to that one in the lower right. Like there's no way for me to say basically disable all. And it would be, I really wish just one single add-on, if they could have that, just like tell this visual to exist. And I usually, honestly, for things like that, I just go and write a measure that ignores everything because it's faster than having to turn off everything. And then it's future-proof because any new visual on the page automatically talks to it. So I really wish there was some toggle in the format settings to disable all, which includes current and future. It just says nothing talks to this visual. It's on an island. And, someday I'm hoping for like some tool that can automate that, but that is a pain point. And I like this because you see inbound, outbound, and I think that really does help to me to mentally understand how Power BI is working. So that's a nice feature.
Yeah, and while we, as I said earlier, while we can't write anything back to the report, we can at least help visualize. Okay, so where is the issue? Where did you actually have some unexpected interactions?
And you can also see, you can also see, with requests like that, Reed, once Microsoft supports editing, then, there is definitely an interesting scenario for tools like this one or new tools to support those kinds of requests without us being bound to what the desktop team decides to put in there. Yes.
And again, I'll just, there are people out there who definitely go ham using tools and visuals, VS Code and other stuff to unofficially modify those stuff. So I'll just, it's not impossible, but 1000%, if the random chance any of those files ever break and it's determined that it's been modified anyway, there's no Microsoft support for it. So yes, you can use them, but there is a risk involved. So just for full context on what that means in terms of some of this. And that's why your tool doesn't edit it. It's not that it can't, it's that it won't, because it's not an officially supported thing today as part of the scope of what is editable right now with the file structures.
Yeah, correct. All right, so one other feature we have here is the ability to track usage of data model elements. And now what we see here on the Data Model Explorer tab is not necessarily a full view of the data model. There could be other tables and within the tables you could have other columns or other measures. This just basically represents the objects that are somehow being used somewhere in the report. And once again, the reason is that, let's say this was a thin report with a live connection to a data set somewhere. We don't actually have, in that case, we wouldn't actually have access to the full data model. So we wouldn't know all of the tables in there, only the objects that we can infer from the fields that are being consumed by the various visuals. However, once we have those, we can easily see where they're being used, and this allows us to track usage across. And the way we visualize it, once you hit the little track usage checkbox here, is that when you click on a field, oh, that wasn't supposed to happen. Okay, let's see if I maybe. Okay, so this apparently brought the app into a bad state. Let's try again.
Just for everyone out there, this is an unreleased alpha version, right? So we're showing you something that's fresh from the build server.
Yeah. I was about to say the exact same thing. Is like these are all like brand new beta stuff, so there'll occasionally be bugs on a tool like this.
Let's try it. So this one apparently, okay, let me go with a different build because this one seems to be completely botched. So give me a second, I'll just load the latest official version, which should be this one. Because in this version, I know for sure that this feature works. All right, so here we go. So let's go once again with the COVID bake-off, and let's go select country. Okay, what's going on here? It's not. Okay, that's a bit disappointing. So I must admit I haven't tested it with this particular report. Oh wait. Oh, still getting the same error. That's bad. Let's try one more time, and this time let's use a report that I have tested beforehand, which would be the boring AdventureWorks report, which doesn't really have a lot of stuff going on. Here we go. So now, as you can see, when we click on an element from the report, it's going to highlight, first of all, the pages in which that element is being used. And then once you navigate to one of these pages, it's going to highlight the particular the particular visual that uses that element. So another example would be month. We can see month is being used both by this slicer and by this area chart. Product category is being used on this matrix and also on page 2 in this matrix. So that's the idea anyway, to visualize where
and just a quick random question on this. So I do notice in your hierarchy, because normally you have the top parent is above, child is below, but month's at the top of this. So curiously, is that the way it is in the model, or is it sorting that alphabetically in this list?
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it was set up that way in the model. It is AdventureWorks after all.
That's fair. Okay.
It could be a bug. I don't know for sure, to be honest.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, and it's one of those curiosities because I'm sure either one of those could be true. Or like potentially this could just be doing an alphabetical sort, but also that just might be the random order it's in.
I can answer that actually.
Oh, nice.
So because we don't have access to the full model metadata, we don't have that information, right? The order of items within the hierarchy, that's part of model metadata. That's not stored in the report. You know, we can only see that the report happens to reference month and year, but we don't know anything else about them.
Okay, nope, yeah, that makes sense.
All right, so basically the main point of the report inspector that we've looked at so far is to let you dive deep into the details of the report meets data, looking at usage, interactions, filters, that kind of stuff. In fact, the entire object model that Mathias talked about is exposed, and we show it here in the property grid, so you can dive deep and look at all of these settings. If you prefer, we also have the JSON view, which is probably nonsensical in some cases, but we do, however, try to let you navigate it in a relatively easy way. So if you are one of these people that have experimented with the report JSON in the past, you'll probably recognize some of the structures here. But for the rest of us, there's the properties view that lets you go in and inspect this stuff. And for sure, we have many feature improvements planned, like a way to search to find things by name, for example. Or you can, in fact, you can already do stuff like, let me open a different report that has a bit more meat. Let's go with, once again, the COVID bake-off. You can already do things like filtering the report explorer by visual type, for example. So if you're only interested in seeing, okay, where are my line charts? Well, you can just put a filter, and then you can basically just click on them to get an idea of, okay, on which pages am I using these line charts, or where are they physically located in the report. So we have these, and those of you that use Tabular Editor 3 will probably recognize this type of UI for filtering. It's basically because we're using the same type of UI framework, which allows us to do this. All right. So I think that's enough about the report inspector. I also want to move on to the report comparer, which is also a very interesting feature of the product. So unless there are any questions regarding the report inspector and what we've seen so far?
I did have a question queued up that at least I thought was a not necessarily on this. So I have a more open-ended question about the product. I can either keep that for the general Q&A at the end. It's about like, it's going to be related to commercial plans for this, particularly on like support, elevated support and other stuff. So I can bring that up now, or like I said, it's already in my queue, so I can bring that up if that's a planned conversation further down.
Let's take that at the end of the stream, because it's a good topic at that point. Yeah.
Perfect.
All right, so next up is the report comparer, which has this left and right view that allows us to compare two PBIX files or two report files. So one way you could do that is by comparing, for example, if you have at a file level, if you have many people, when they do versioning, they just store additional copies of the same file. So I could have an AdventureWorks V1 PBIX and an AdventureWorks V2, and then I could load them side by side and have a look. But one other feature that we thought would be very useful for a lot of people is to actually integrate with Git. So let's say you have a PBIX file or any report file in version control. We actually want you to be able to pick up the file and compare it with a previous commit in your Git history. So this is also not yet available in the public version, but it will be coming very soon as well. So for example, if I go back to the AdventureWorks model, and now specifically for this report, I actually made a change, which I haven't committed yet, and we can actually see that if we go to my to the command line, we can see here that the AdventureWorks sales PBIX was modified. So I made some changes to this file using Power BI Desktop, which I haven't yet committed. So this is not the latest. So the file right now does not correspond to the latest commit in my Git repository. So let me open up this file. And then what happens is that, I need to switch to the new beta version for this to work. So let's go here. Let's try once again. So then what happens is that PBI Explorer discovers that the file is being tracked in Git, and then it shows this interface to prompting you to choose a commit to compare it to. So the latest commit in this case would be this one, but I could go back and compare it to even earlier versions if I wanted to. And interestingly enough, since this is from the official Power BI sample report repo, then we have some interesting people who have been working on these reports in the past. But anyway, if I go ahead and compare this to the latest commit in the repository, I can just click OK, and it'll load this comparison view where, first of all, it renders the report both left and right. In this case, the only change that I made was that I added a new page to the report. So this is just a blank page that you'll find on the file on the left, which doesn't exist on the one on the right. And the object model basically says the same thing, that we have a new page here that has some properties on it which do not exist in the version on the right. Now, right now, this has been limited to only show differences, we can also choose to show identical items, and then we get a whole bunch of stuff, basically the entire
Oh, Daniel might have frozen on his on his stream. I still get you're still moving, Matthias. So, but Daniel,
yes, and I can still hear you, but
yeah,
unfortunately not Daniel.
All right. Well, we'll I'll actually ask you this, and hopefully he pops back in a second. So, Matthias, can you select a local file, but then compare that to anything in a Git history? Because let's just assume you're working like locally with one. You've made some changes, and you just want to maybe see what's actually been adjusted on the file that you just kind of have in hand versus something that's actually in the repository. Or would you first have to push it back to the repository as a new build and then compare from there?
Well, theoretically you could. I don't see any technical reason why you couldn't. That's not a scenario we have in mind right now. But I don't see, why we couldn't do that. Right now, you've got two different paths. You can either bring two separate files, or you can select a file that happens to be in a Git repo.
Oh, hey. Apparently,
you're good.
I got dropped from the call, so I don't know when that happened. You
were mostly walking your way through that, and then I just had a question I was asking Matthias on Git. So we'll finish that up, and then I'll throw it back to you, and then we can continue through that file explorer.
Yeah, we can hear you.
And can hear you just fine.
It's the advantage of having two guests. I was able to fill in.
Yes,
the gap.
Exactly.
So Git comparison mode is linked to a single repo and then basically different stages of your history.
Right, but I don't have any audio. That's weird.
Okay.
Hang on a second.
Okay.
Yeah, it's my machine. Sorry, I'll have to reboot. I'll be back in 1 minute.
Totally fine. We'll see you back in a minute. I'll just continue with you, Matthias. And also, I was about to say, if you have anything up, because I know that's Daniel's screen, if you want to take over, that also is the other benefit of having two guests. Yes.
I prepared some demos as well, so might as well do that.
Once you take over, you'll just swap the feed.
Okay.
Beautiful. Look at that. Excellent.
Okay, cool. So you should see Power BI Desktop here. I just wanted to sort of dig a little deeper and explain to everyone who's interested how things are linked. So I'm looking at a pretty basic standard report here. I've got a table selected, as you can see. And over here is the format pane, which you'll recognize, right? And just in terms of naming, each visual has two different types of settings. There are visual specific ones, and then there are the general settings, which are common to every single visual type out there. The collapsible sections here, Power BI calls them objects. So style presets would be an object, grid would be an object, values would be an object, and each object then basically has properties. So just a little bit of terminology, if that makes sense. Now, if you're a report developer, and right, so this is a table, right? So relatively basic visual type, right? But you can actually see that even that one comes with a very large number of sort of formatable objects, right? If you go in here and say expand everything, then you see there's actually a huge selection of possibilities. As a report developer, you wouldn't necessarily know whether you've made any custom settings anywhere or whether everything happens to be default, right? That could be quite problematic in terms of actually reviewing, what's been done to my report, et cetera, et cetera. PBI Explorer, I've got the exact same report open here, report 1. If I go to the same page, filters, and then go to my table, it's easy to identify because I can just click here, right? This one actually shows me that none of the objects and properties have any non-default settings. How do I know that? if I click on show empty, I can see there's a whole new section down here, which says visual properties, and you'll actually recognize those ones map directly to those collapsible sections I was just showing, right? It just happens to be that actually none of them have any user settings, which is why when you unselect show empty, they won't show up here, right? So this is already one huge advantage over what you get out of the box with respect to desktop. And then the other thing is, for anyone who is interested in the underlying code, we obviously have the JSON view here. If you want to, you can copy that and paste that into VS Code, for instance, which then allows you to format and collapse it very nicely, right? And basically make sense of it. Where we've come from, you know, I started talking about developer mode initially. This is actually what developer mode gives you, right? Where you we'll find out pretty quickly that section is the internal name for page, and then you'll see that basically each page is represented in a JSON object like that, and each visual shows up as a visual container. However, the big problem here is that all the interesting stuff is actually hidden, right? The interesting stuff is here, non-readable, right? And same here. You only really get X, Y, Z, and height and width, which frankly isn't very interesting information. So this is, you know, where we're providing a huge benefit over what dev mode gives you, right? And not only that, but on top of that, as you've seen, we actually have a readable JSON representation at every single level, right? We've got it for the visual, we've got it for the page, we've got it for the report, right? Each of those happen to have up to 3 JSON objects, and a config generally is the one that sort of is the most interesting one. So that's that. And then I wanted to show something else. So there's a very interesting feature in desktop where, for example, in a matrix like this one, you can actually you can adjust column widths individually for specific values in your in that category, right? Now it happens to be the case that if you go to your settings, column width doesn't even show up. That's not a thing, right? However, if we're looking at this in PBI Explorer, so I'm going to selectors, go to my matrix, I can see down here, I do have column width as one of those objects, and now it gets really interesting. Look at this. I have so this is a very special feature of Power BI reports where you can basically have scoped properties. And this one says that for the continent value Asia, I've got a column width setting. For the continent value Europe, I've got another column width setting. That's something which isn't even exposed in desktop. You would never be able to actually see what you've done there in terms of setting that. You would never be able to see that you happen to have those scoped settings, right? We currently have a limitation where the actual setting isn't exposed, but that's on the that's on a to-do list. But I just wanted to give that as another really cool example where PBI Explorer already offers lots of benefits. So anything
Daniel,
you wanted to add, Daniel?
Yeah, exactly.
No, just
I have a couple of thoughts as well when you're done.
Yeah, I just want to add a quick note about this that Mathias is showing. This is actually one thing to be aware about, because for the TOM, for example, the tabular object model, we know as a fact that the tabular object model itself does not contain any data. It only contains metadata, like the structure of tables, columns, and measures, DAX expressions, and so on your model. For the report, I mean, up until we started working with this, my assumption was that the report metadata itself, the report JSON, was also only metadata. It may have had some references to data model elements, measures and columns and so on, but this actually indicates that the report metadata itself can contain data from your model. In this case, these are actual values that identify the individual columns of this matrix, values from within the data of your model. So this is actually something to be aware about. If you think it's safe to maybe export a PBIX file to a PBI-T format or to the developer mode report.json, and then you think, hey, now I just have a file that doesn't contain any actual data. Well, that's actually not the case, because there are situations where actual data from your model can leak into the report metadata. So yeah, something to be aware about at least.
So a couple of curiosities. I know like a lot of people have had that pain point. Like in Excel, you can select columns and you can set a width for everything at the same time. Like there's a way to set all. I know there is like, again, like you can hack apart the file to do that in Power BI. Like it's again, not officially supported. Curiously, just in a theoretical future, like if we ever get a readable language for reporting, like would this be something that would be able to then, like, I want everything to be width 15. That would be something possible as a potential future, right?
I mean, technically it's already possible now, but as we pointed out many times before, it's not supported, right? So we're waiting for Microsoft to give us the thumbs up.
One other follow-up to that though. So we have 3 continents today. We can apply a width of 15 to those. If a 4th or a 5th, or better said, like section, whatever, like we have 3 categories. If a 4th category showed up in the future, it is just, given the structure of how Power BI works, would it be possible to continue to apply those to new theoretical categories that come out, like a fixed width that you can permanently set, or is that a limitation of the visual? That's auto, the auto size there. Like that's the dynamic one. You turn that off.
With respect to how desktop works, we've got that. If you turn it off, I don't know what it does, to be honest.
So that adjusts the width dynamically each time you select a slicer or the model refreshes. It looks at the values in the row, and it looks at the title, and it attempts to fit both, because it doesn't want to wrap a grand total. So it will. I honestly turn it off 99% of the time. It just, because I build my column width to fit my visual container usually. But I would imagine that you could probably set these 3. But if a 4th one came in, due to the limitation of just how things are scoped, you probably couldn't have this column with 15 apply to ones that haven't shown up yet. You'd have to come back and probably use the tool. But that's, I think, a limitation I would assume on the product itself and just how it documents, because it's not, there's no code that says all columns equal this. You have to do one column at a time.
Well, as far as the format is concerned, there is actually a facility when you have scope properties to provide a default. Whether or not desktop actually honors that specifically for this type of visual and for that property, we don't know, but it's something we could test out, right?
You can say hi to Kurt, and he's confirming. Yeah, there's no default width property in the unfortunately in the report. .json. I wish there was, but it's like it's the width is per column, and that has a custom name. Someday maybe, like if anybody on the Microsoft PM team is like, have it a bit of code that sets the default for everything. Be a really nice feature to add to the matrix table.
So let me just make one last note, if I may. Remember when I talked about us actually having a static object model in place that statically knows what possible objects and properties there are, right? That's precisely what we can see here in action. So first of all, if I take this as an example and look at what we're getting here. Here we go. So this particular visual right now basically only has column width as an object, right? And then as we've seen, it happens to have the column width value set for specific selections, right? which means if our tool only looked at the JSON, it wouldn't know about any other properties or objects that exist for matrix, right? But if we go here and say show empty, as I said before, right, we can actually show you, right, which you know, thinking about sort of future enhanced scenarios is actually a big deal, because it gives report developers and advanced report developers sort of a full understanding of what's there, what can be customized and what can be styled, etc., etc. Yeah. So
awesome.
Back to Daniel, if you're if you want to continue on the div view.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know when did you lose me? Did you see that I did compare two versions of Advanced UX PBIX, one being
yes, we got to the point of a couple new pages, and I think you were showing similar versus different between a few of those, and you were starting to expand into the hierarchies just a little bit.
Right. Okay. Yeah, so the point I was trying to make is that once you have two versions of a report loaded, by default, it'll show you just the differences between the two, but we do have an option to also show identical items. So basically getting the full object model similar as to what you see on the report inspector page. So in this case, for example, if you click on a visual, you can see, okay, so this visual hasn't changed. It's exactly the same in both versions. And everything where we actually do have changes is called out with different background colors and some indicators here. So this, I think, provides a much better way of actually understanding what has changed between two different versions of a report file. So for things like change management and validating pull requests, for example, if keeping with the Git lingo, I think this is a super invaluable tool, and unlike anything that we've had in the past, like for example, anyone who's ever tried to do a Git diff between the raw report.json would just get a bunch of meaningless differences all over the place, which would be very difficult to interpret. Also because, as Mathias showed earlier, everything is just shown in a like the interesting bits, the config JSON is all compacted into a single line of code. So it's completely impossible to understand what's going on just from looking at the Git diffs.
I like the fact that you get rid of a lot of the noise, as you mentioned, which is like, yes, there's so many small things that can change, which, yes, that's a difference, but do you care about that change in terms of impact to the report that much?
Exactly. I mean, we're trying to still, of course, show every diff that exists in the model, but at least the way we visualize it, the way we represent it in this hierarchical view, coupled with the wireframe on top, makes it easy to understand. Okay, so what are the actual important differences that I should know about when looking at this comparison? So yeah, super interesting feature. You can always see which two versions you are comparing by mousing over. For example, if it's two different Git commits you are comparing, we'll show the Git commit message as well. So yeah, the Git integration is, as I said, it's coming with the next public update. So if you already have your report metadata stored in Git source control, you can use this feature right away.
I love it.
All right, I think that about sums up what I wanted to say to show for the UI for the report analyzer. Unfortunately, we're not yet able to show anything, but rest assured that some very cool stuff is coming in that area as well.
Also, curiously, the minor changes, similar to like a best report practices analyzer, where you can turn things. Oh yeah. I mean, I might have missed that while I was on the chat. So yes, so minor changes. Tab order position. Okay, cool. You can turn it on and off. It's not just all minor changes. You can decide what you consider minor. And I'm guessing that list might grow in the future, but all of those you'll probably continually get a growing list of sectioned items to be able to look at or not look at. Okay, excellent.
Yeah. Yeah, and over time this will probably change, and as you said, the list will grow. We will find out, okay, so what are the changes that actually are meaningful to look at when comparing two versions of the report, and most likely there will be a lot of various system tightly so like very specific things that are not really things that the user has any direct control over, and those would definitely fit into the minor change category, at least if they don't affect the overall functionality of the report. So
Yep.
we have many options of configuring this drop down, and yeah, so we're just looking for feedback, what makes sense to show, what doesn't make sense to show. So just hit us on GitHub, and we will try to make this the best possible diff compare tool for Power BI reports.
Yeah, and like in this way, you won't have to have premium to do it either, because like there is, from the model perspective, there's the diff compare that's kind of hidden and baked into deployment pipelines if people haven't used it, but you
right.
have to use some kind of premium for that. So this will be a nice free diff compare.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, PBI Explorer is completely free. It's always going to be free, and it's just a completely local application you install and run on your own machine. So you can compare it with local PBIX files or using a Git repository, as I shown. You don't even have to connect to the Power BI service, anything like that. So it just works with the files.
Excellent. And I think I know you mentioned you wanted to talk about this, and I think a good kind of closing conversation is to talk about some of the proposed plans for this, and also like will this be completely free? Will there be any paid tiers? I know one person had, and I'll put this up to start the conversation, specifically because I think one of the reasons of wanting a commercial plan for this is elevated support. Like GitHub could take a while to get support for that, but if you're paying for something, you might have a shorter pipeline to getting an answer on something. As part of like, similar Tabular Editor where you have the dedicated support. So I'll let you take the question from there.
Yeah, so I mean, Tabular Tools, after all, it's a new company that we've started, and we are going to do, as I mentioned in the beginning, we are going to put new products in the market. Some of them are going to be free, like what you've seen just now, and some of them are going to be commercial. And we're trying to find this balance where we can output a bunch of useful tools that can really benefit the community, while also trying to make a living out of this, so that we can keep going. And DAX Optimizer, as most of you probably already know, is a commercial offering, but it is partly paying for the investments that we can now make in tools like PBI Explorer. Regarding support, I mean, it's still to be decided. Right now, GitHub is the only channel for support, but who knows? I mean, maybe one day we can offer like a premium support tier for PBI Explorer, but I mean, that's still to be decided. This is still very early days.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and you don't even know exactly every single tool that's going to be in, because this is a tool kit. It's not just a single tool. Yeah. It's a toolbox that has a series of tools inside of it. So I'm assuming your considerations on where this will go in terms of free versus commercial will be partially determined by what tools even become available in this as well, for that. And I just have one curiosity. I did see, as you mentioned, that there is now, like DAX Optimizer will be something that's paid, and they will have, I think it's per run or something like that. But you also just think about, if you have a model with 1,000 measures that you're handed, how many hours would it take you to actually audit all 1,000 to find the bad ones versus you paid $30 to analyze it? I do have one question. I haven't used it since I've seen that paid tier yet. If you have this same model and you need to reanalyze it after fixing changes, like the same one, is it 100% just pure run that you do a payment structure, or is there like X number of reruns allowed against the same one that you're trying to make little tweaks to, or?
Yeah, so right now a run is a run, but we are actually talking internally about like changing. So because there are actually several elements to a run. So first of all, we scan the code for anti-patterns, specific DAX anti-patterns, but then we also do a lot of stuff regarding cardinality estimation, and in order to try to estimate the weight and the complexity and memory usage and so on of the calculation. And we could consider having some kind of lightweight run, which would just do the DAX anti-pattern scan, which is simpler, basically. And that could be maybe for reruns, perhaps that could be free or be less expensive or something. I mean, that's still to be decided. Again, it's very early days also of DAX optimizing. So we're trying to figure out what works best. But then again, $30 and you're basically getting Marco Russo as a service. It's I mean, in my opinion, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, I was a little afraid of the because I've definitely given that DAX optimizer a couple of models that I haven't touched yet. But there's a few ones that I built that I considered for myself like, oh no, this was a properly built model, but there's a bit of just, oh, how many slaps in the wrist is this going to give me that I also have actually missed? And thankfully there was only a few here and there. There was one about an iterator within an X function, something like that, but the model was complex enough that there wasn't any way to get the same number out around that. So yes, it was a slow measure, but thankfully it was, to a degree, the shape of the model, that was the best version that I could write. But I love it. I'm definitely using that tool now. And again, time saver. Anything that can just save hours, or yes, you could do this by hand, but Power Query value comes from the fact that it automates stuff. All these tools it basically just seems to be various degrees of automation. And I think that's going to be so helpful for developers to not only review what they've built themselves, but especially for people who, and it's the my presentation that I've been previewing this last year is it's fixing a bad report, a hot potato story that I've demoed at a lot of different conferences. Like, what do you do with a report you're given with no requirements? What do you fix? Both the optimizer and this it's the model layer, the reporting layer. Here's all the anti-patterns that you can avoid and eventually fix. So this is just going to be a huge time saver for people given those files. So looking forward to all the stuff that's coming out for this in the near future.
Yeah, and absolutely. And the thing is now with Tabular Tools, with us joining forces, I mean, we can use the synergies that arise between the tools, between the technologies that we have invested in. So for example, one of the enablers of DAX Optimizer was the DAX parser that we created for initially for Tabular Editor 3. But then again, if you think ahead for a couple of months or maybe a year's time, think about the potential, the things that we may be able to do one day. Like, for example, with the report object model, we know which measures and fields are being used where. And from that, we can actually infer the DAX query that a given report would generate. And then coupled with the DAX optimizer, we could figure out, okay, so who cares if you have a measure that's slow? If you're not using that measure in any reports, it doesn't matter. So there's this ton of interesting directions we can go in because we now have all of this knowledge and all of these technologies centered in one place. The future is going to be exciting, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're about to have 3 products that you're all in, that you're involved with. That's going to be the model best practices optimizer, DAX practices optimizer, and a report practices optimizer. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much everything for a report and data set that can be auto scanned. So it's definitely an exciting time, I think, this year with Microsoft's had big releases and external tools. I'm collectively calling a lot of these things external tools, even though they're not necessarily directly plugged in, but the software built around it has had huge releases. So this has been a cool year. So I appreciate both of you for coming on and giving each of your expertise and opinions on like kind of what this tool is doing today and where it's headed. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
If I may, just very quickly, there should be, for PBI Explorer, if there are 2 takeaways. First of all, we made a very strong commitment for it to always be free. It's on the website, and we mean it, right? Secondly, by definition, the scope of the tool is always going to be read-only, right? PBI Explorer, it's in the name. We're just exploring, right? Even if other things become available, we're probably talking a different type of tool at that point. So just wanted to make that really clear because it came up in the chat as well. But thanks for having us.
Absolutely, and I'm sure with this tool, hopefully in another 6 to 12 months, there's going to be all sorts of new bells and whistles that will easily merit another hour discussion and deep dive. So either the two of you or at some point even getting Marco to chat about some of this stuff, or that once he's willing to and wanting to present on the DAX optimizer, getting him on at some point too, because I know people have talked about that, but I think there's no official discussions or demos of the DAX optimizer yet, but the community at large has been showcasing it as they've been exploring it and everything.
Yeah, Marco did write some blog posts on the story behind it and some of the technology internally, how it works. So if you go to daxoptimizer.com, I believe there's a blog section where you can find these. Very interesting if you want to know a bit more about DAX Optimizer.
Excellent. Yeah. Tabular Tools link is down in the description below in the video, so all of that will then link to the optimizer and PBI Explorer and anything else that all of you have built. So check out those links below. Otherwise, for both of you, enjoy your evening. I will see you Sunday, because I'm flying tonight to Brussels. I'll be in Bruges and then popping over to, remind me of the city name. It's not Brussels. It's
Mechelen.
North of Mechelen. Yes.
Yeah, we're all going to be there from Sunday. Exciting.
Exactly. Yeah, the three of us are doing a stream, and we're actually going to be seeing each other in person for DataMinds conference that Benny helps host, who works at Microsoft. So we're all excited for that, and I'm looking forward to seeing you both there.
Yeah, likewise.
Cool.
Have a good flight.
All right. Thank you so much. Enjoy your night, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you online next week. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. And if you want to help support this channel, take a look at our channel memberships or our merchandise store for cool swag. And last but not least, please consider sharing this video on your social media platform of choice to help our channel grow. So, until next time.